Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Bluebeard, a South Korean drama thriller from 2017. So our protagonist here is a doctor who is coping with his recently failed marriage. A while back, he opened a clinic in Gangnam which promptly went bankrupt on him. He subsequently lands a job at a hospital run by his friend in the working class district of Hwajung, a place that was made popular years ago by a handful of serial killings that went unsolved. Things become dangerous again when a woman's severed body emerges from the Han River. Now our protagonist puts two and two together and begins to suspect the butchers who work in his apartment complex are actually murdering people. Things become complicated, however, when he sees a strange black bag that was planted in his freezer, which could be the severed head of the recent victim. Now, the first thing to understand about Bluebeard is that this is not your typical South Korean thriller that showcases a serial killer. The violence is tempered, with only a small amount of bloody imagery, none of which is particularly graphic. There are no highlight suspense sequences or exhilarating moments of intensity. Instead, this movie builds uncertainty with no therapeutic release for the viewer at all. This is not a crowd-pleasing feat of fun entertainment. It's more like a technical exercise in creating a traditional murder mystery with a lot of misdirection on the part of the filmmakers. This is a glacially paced movie that focuses heavily on psychology, and taking that all into consideration, in that sense, I thought it did a good job. If you decide to watch this movie, though, make sure that you're in a thinking mood. Bluebeard requires a lot of effort on the viewer's part because you must pay attention to the little details in order to appreciate those misdirections. So in kind of a classic murder mystery style, while watching this film, I was constantly trying to figure out how to make sense of all of the clues that were presented. And, I was trying to pinpoint the identity of the murderer. And that theory changed as more evidence was presented to me. I mean, heck, even our protagonist becomes confused and paranoid when he continues his investigation. And one reason for this is because the stress of the situation gives him nightmares. And those nightmares are presented to the viewer in such a way that you're led to believe that some of these images could be real events. So this tactic kind of helps to disorient the protagonist and the viewer. And that kind of brings me to a few things that I think could have been better executed in this film. Now, with regard to those nightmares that I mentioned, they're presented in a fairly repetitive style. I'm going to avoid details on that because it could be considered spoilerish, but what I can say here is that those dream sequences could have been presented in a less cliched way. You know, when they're presented, I just kind of like, I've seen that kind of thing before, and maybe they could have blended them in a more proficient and interesting way. Also, I do think that some viewers will find this movie to be too slow for their liking. Again, there's not much excitement in this one, and it moves as slow as molasses in January. Even the answer to the murder mystery itself is revealed in kind of a matter-of-fact way. You know, it doesn't crescendo in a huge explosion of violence and awesomeness, you know what I mean? So some people may not be a fan of that either, especially if they're expecting like an intense conclusion to things. But I do think that the positives of Bluebeard outweigh its negatives for sure. You know, I previously mentioned the proficiency of the murder mystery elements, and this film is also very well directed. The director here is Hwajung Lee, who previously gave us The Uninvited from 2003, a very impressive psychological horror film that I strongly recommend. Again, don't get that confused with the American film from like 2009. That's totally different. Be sure if you watch The Uninvited, watch one from 2003, the Korean film. And if you've seen that film, you'll probably know that Bluebeard is in good hands. You'll know what to expect. Performances are also very good across the board. Now, this is one of those movies that's kind of hard to talk about without giving away spoilers, so I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. In conclusion, I do recommend Bluebeard if you're in the mood for a slow-paced psychological murder mystery. And it is widely available on DVD and Blu-ray. It just came out. And as always, we'll see you next time.